I'm Jack Royce, 32, just another corporate accountant crunching numbers in a mid-sized tech firm in Austin, Texas. My life's as predictable as the spreadsheets I manage. Work, home, dinner, maybe a Rangers game on TV or a few pages of a thriller novel before bed. I live in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a suburban complex off South Congress where the air smells of barbecue from nearby food trucks and the evenings hum with cicadas. I'm not the guy who stands out in the office. I'm the one who nods politely, keeps his head down, and gets the job done. My co-workers know me well enough to swap small talk in the break room, but that's where it ends. I like it that way. Simple, steady, no surprises. That is, until last week, when everything changed. Rose Wilton works in HR, 2 cubicles down from mine. She's 36, with calm green eyes that seem to hold a story she's not ready to tell, and a quiet strength that makes you notice her even when she's silent. She was married to Mark, a senior project manager in his late 40s, always rushing through the office with a phone glued to his ear. I'd say hi to Rose in passing, quick hellos by the coffee machine or a nod in the elevator, but we never really talked. Mark, though, always seemed like he was late for something, his mind somewhere else. Rose, on the other hand, had this presence that lingered, like the scent of jasmine after a Texas rain. Last Monday, the office buzzed with whispers. Mark had died. A heart attack, sudden and final over the weekend. I didn't go to the funeral, didn't feel it was my place. But the day after, around 4 p.m., I was working from home, still in my hoodie and sweatpants, when a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Rose standing there, a long black coat draped over her shoulders, her auburn hair pulled back, and a paper cup of coffee from Joe's Coffee in her hand. Her eyes were red, tired, but steady. "Hi, Jack," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I come in for a minute?" I stepped aside, and she walked into my living room, her steps slow like she was carrying something heavy. I offered her a seat on my worn leather couch and put the kettle on for tea, figuring coffee might be too much for her nerves. She sat, hands in her lap, staring at the steam curling from her cup like it held answers. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke. "It's too quiet at home," she whispered. "I thought I could handle it, but I can't be alone right now." I nodded, not pressing her. "You don't have to explain," I said. We sat there sipping chamomile tea, the only sound the faint hum of traffic outside. She started talking about Mark, how their marriage hadn't been right for years. "We were more like roommates," she said, her voice steady but raw. "The last 2 years he was always working late, traveling, distracted. I felt like I was disappearing in my own life." She paused, her green eyes meeting mine. "I know it sounds awful, but I think I grieved him long before he was gone." I didn't know what to say, so I listened. That's what she needed. A witness to her truth. Before she left, she looked around my small apartment with its mismatched furniture and baseball memorabilia. "It feels warm here," she said, a faint smile breaking through. Then she was gone, back to her apartment across the complex, leaving a quiet shift in the air. I stood by the door, staring at the spot where she'd been, feeling something I couldn't name. The next morning, I couldn't focus. Emails piled up, spreadsheets blurred, but all I could see was Rose on my couch, her hands cradling that cup like it was her lifeline. Her honesty, her vulnerability, it got under my skin. By noon, I was still staring at the same report when another knock came. It was her again, no coat this time, just jeans, sneakers, and a gray hoodie that looked like it had seen better days. In her hands were 2 paper bags from Thundercloud Subs, a local deli. "Figured you forgot to eat," she said with a half smile. "Mind if I join you?" She didn't wait for an answer, stepping inside like it was natural. We sat on my back patio, the sky heavy with gray clouds, the air cool with the promise of rain. She handed me a turkey and Swiss sub, and we ate in silence, the only sound the rustle of sandwich wrappers. She stared at the live oaks lining the complex, her mind somewhere else. "It's strange," she said finally. I thought I'd be wrecked, crying, screaming, but I just feel empty, like I'm living someone else's life. I glanced at her, her profile sharp against the gray sky. That emptiness, it's heavy too, I said. She nodded, still looking away. It started years ago, Jack. Mark got so caught up in work, always on calls, always gone. I'd eat dinner alone, even when he was home. We shared a bed, but it felt like strangers. Her voice cracked, but no tears came. You ever feel like you're fading away in your own life? I nodded, not because I'd lived her exact pain, but because loneliness has its own universal language. We talked then, about nothing heavy at first. She mentioned her love for old Wes Anderson films. I admitted to a typo in a company-wide email once that read pubic announcement instead of public. She laughed, a real laugh, and it was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Her hand brushed mine on the table, just for a second, and her face flickered. Guilt, maybe, or confusion. This is too soon, she said, standing abruptly. I don't want you to think I'm leaning on you too much. You're not, I said, standing too. Anytime you need to talk, or not talk, I'm here. She hesitated, then nodded, her eyes soft. As she walked back to her apartment, I watched her go, her arms crossed, hair catching the breeze. Something had shifted, and it wasn't going away. That afternoon, as I tried to get back to work, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan Kessler, a co-worker in IT. Ryan's the kind of guy who knows everyone's business, always lingering too long at the water cooler. Heard you and Rose are getting close, the text read. Careful, man. Mark had secrets, stuff even she doesn't know. I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. What did Ryan know? And why did it feel like a warning? The next morning, Austin woke under a blanket of clouds, the kind that promises rain but holds off just to keep you guessing. I sat at my kitchen table, a lukewarm coffee from Stubbs BBQ in my hand, trying to focus on a budget report. But my mind was elsewhere, circling back to Rose's visit yesterday, her quiet confession, and that fleeting touch of her hand. Then there was Ryan's text, cryptic and unsettling. Mark had secrets? I didn't know what to make of it, but it gnawed at me, like a loose thread I couldn't help but pull. Around 10:01 a.m., I glanced out my window, facing the courtyard of our apartment complex. Rose's patio was visible, and there she was, standing near the edge, arms wrapped tightly around herself, like she was holding something in. She looked small, vulnerable, caught between staying put and running. I told myself I wasn't spying, just checking, but I couldn't look away. 15 minutes later, a knock came. I knew it was her before I opened the door. Rose stood there in a navy sweater, one shoulder slipping slightly, and black leggings. No makeup, no pretense, just her, raw and real. Her green eyes held a quiet intensity, like she'd been wrestling with a decision. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside and she walked in, slower this time, her gaze sweeping my living room like it might hold answers. "I wasn't going to come," she said after a moment, settling onto the couch, pulling her knees up. "I've been pacing for an hour, but I didn't know where else to go." "You don't need a reason," I said, sitting across from her, giving her space. The room was quiet, just the faint tick of my old wall clock and the distant hum of a lawnmower. She exhaled, her voice low. "I've never been alone, Jack. I went from my parents' house to living with Mark. There was always someone. Now it's just me, and it's suffocating." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "That's a hard shift," I said. "Loneliness like that, it's heavier when it's new." She nodded, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "The thing is, I felt alone even when Mark was alive. We stopped talking, really talking, years ago. I was mourning us before he was gone." Her words were heavy, deliberate, like she was unloading a weight she'd carried too long. "Do you think it's wrong I don't feel guilty being here?" she asked, her eyes locking onto mine. "Talking to you like this so soon?" I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "There's no clock on grief or connection. You're here because you need to be. That's not wrong." Her shoulders relaxed, like she'd been waiting for permission to breathe. "I didn't expect to feel drawn to someone," she whispered. "Not now." "Neither did I admitted. She looked down, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Then quietly she said, "I don't want to go back home tonight. Not because I'm running, but because I feel like I'm drowning there." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the weight of it. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I'll make up the guest room." Her eyes glistened and she blinked quickly. "I didn't expect you to say that." I shrugged. "You're not alone, Rose." She nodded, a small smile breaking through, and I felt the air shift again, heavier, warmer. I pulled sheets from the closet and set up the guest room while she sat in the living room, sipping chamomile tea I'd made. We didn't talk much, but the silence felt right, like a shared language. Before bed, she stepped toward me, her expression soft. "Thank you, Jack," she said, "for not asking too many questions, for making me feel human again." Then she hugged me, nothing dramatic, just steady, her head resting against my shoulder. I held her, my arms firm but gentle, and the moment lingered raw and real. "Good night," she whispered, then slipped into the guest room. I didn't sleep much that night, not because anything happened, nothing did, but because I was aware. Rose was down the hall carrying a grief I could only imagine, and she'd chosen my apartment as her refuge. That hug stayed with me, not because it was romantic, but because it was needed. By morning, the sky was still gray, and I brewed coffee, standing by the kitchen window, watching the light spill over the courtyard. Rose's footsteps came, soft and cautious, and she appeared, wrapped in a gray blanket from the guest room, her hair tousled, but her face calm. "Morning," she said, taking the mug I offered. We stood in silence, sipping coffee, the quiet comforting. She sat at the table, pulling the blanket tighter, and stared out the window. "I have no idea what I'm doing," she said finally. "I don't think you're supposed to," I replied. "You're figuring it out 1 minute at a time. That's enough." She looked at me, her eyes holding something deeper. Not romance, not yet, but a kind of trust. "Yesterday, sitting here, talking, just breathing, it felt like I got a piece of myself back." She paused. "Mark and I, we weren't a couple anymore. We shared an apartment, a life on paper, but emotionally, strangers." I listened, letting her words settle. "I came here because I couldn't take the silence anymore," she said. "And now, I don't want to go back. Not yet." She stayed all day. No plan, just presence. I made scrambled eggs and toast. She laughed when she found a pink sock in my laundry, teasing me about my washing skills. We took a slow walk around the complex, our arms brushing once or twice, neither of us mentioning it. That evening, over pasta and salad, we sat on the couch, a nature documentary humming in the background. "I feel peace here," she said quietly. "Like I'm allowed to just be." "You don't have to rush anything," I said. Her head rested on my shoulder, my arm around her, steady and calm. Then she looked up, our faces close, her breath warm. Slowly, she leaned in, her lips meeting mine in a soft, tentative kiss. A question, not a demand. We pulled back, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't have to be," I said. She leaned against me again, and we stayed like that, quiet, connected. As she slept in the guest room, my phone buzzed, another text from Ryan. "Check Mark's old desk drawer tomorrow. You'll see what I mean." My pulse quickened. What was Ryan hinting at? And why did it feel like trouble was creeping closer? The next few days blurred into a quiet rhythm. Rose returned to her apartment, saying she needed to face the memories lingering in its walls. But she came over daily. Coffee in the mornings, conversations that stretched from grief to laughter. Her smile came easier now, her green eyes brighter, like she was reclaiming pieces of herself. But Ryan's texts haunted me. His cryptic warnings about Mark's secrets felt like a shadow trailing our growing connection, and I couldn't shake the unease. Monday morning, back in the office, the hum of fluorescent lights and clicking keyboards felt stifling. I glanced at Rose's cubicle. She was there, sorting files, her expression focused but softer than before. Ryan, lanky and always slightly disheveled, caught my eye from the IT corner and nodded toward Mark's old desk, now empty but still untouched. Curiosity pulled me over during lunch, when the floor was quiet. The drawer creaked as I opened it, revealing a small locked notebook and a USB drive taped to its cover. My heart thudded. This felt wrong, like trespassing, but Ryan's words echoed. "You'll see what I mean." I slipped the items into my bag, guilt prickling my skin. Back at my apartment that evening, Rose knocked, carrying a bag of tacos from Torchy's. We ate on the patio, the Austin skyline glowing faintly in the distance. She talked about a stray cat she'd once tried to adopt, laughing at how it bolted a week later. I told her about my college days, oversharing about a disastrous karaoke night. Her laughter was lighter now, but my mind kept drifting to the notebook in my bag. Should I tell her? Not yet, I decided. She was healing and I didn't want to disrupt that. But the next day I couldn't resist. Alone in my apartment, I pried open the notebook's lock with a paperclip. Inside were cryptic notes in Mark's tight scrawl. Dates, initials, dollar amounts, and phrases like "drop off at Zilker" and "keep it out." My stomach churned. Was Mark involved in something shady? The USB drive held encrypted files I couldn't access, but the notebook alone was enough to make my skin crawl. I texted Ryan, "What is this?" His reply was instant. "I told you. Mark was in deep, money laundering, maybe worse. Be careful." I didn't tell Rose that night when she came over. We sat on my couch, sharing coffee, her presence grounding me despite the storm in my head. She talked about Mark again, her voice softer now. He changed, Jack. He'd get these late-night calls, lock himself in his office. I thought it was work stress, but maybe I didn't want to see the truth. Her words hit too close to the notebook's secrets. I nodded, my throat tight, and changed the subject to a new coffee shop opening downtown. She smiled, but her eyes searched mine, like she sensed I was holding back. The next evening, she asked to stay again. "I can't face my place tonight," she said, her voice small. I set up the guest room, and we fell into our quiet rhythm. Laundry, a walk, dinner. But Ryan's warning loomed larger. The next morning, as we sipped coffee, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Rose," I said, my voice low, "did Mark ever mention anything unusual about his work?" Her brow furrowed. "Like what?" I hesitated, then told her about the notebook and USB, leaving out the worst of my suspicions. Her face paled. "He kept things from me," she said. "But I never thought, can I see it?" We pored over the notebook together, her fingers trembling as she traced Mark's handwriting. "These initials, RT, JP, they sound familiar, maybe clients," she said. "But this, it doesn't feel right." She looked at me, fear flickering in her eyes. What if he was doing something illegal? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Ryan again. "Someone's asking about the notebook. Don't let Rose know yet." Too late. I showed her the text and her jaw tightened. "Why is Ryan involved?" she asked. "And who's looking for this?" We agreed to keep it quiet for now, but the air felt heavier. That night, Rose stayed again, and as we sat on the couch, she leaned into me, her head on my shoulder. "I don't know what's happening," she whispered, "but I feel safe here." My arm went around her, and we stayed like that, the weight of secrets pressing closer. Then softly, she kissed me again. Just once, tentative, like testing the ground beneath her. We didn't push further, but the connection deepened, fragile but real. The next day, Ryan cornered me in the office break room. "You didn't give her the notebook, did you?" he hissed. His eyes darted nervously. "There's a guy, JP. He's been sniffing around asking about Mark's stuff. Dangerous type." My blood ran cold. JP matched the initials in the notebook. Was Mark tangled with someone dangerous? And why was Ryan so spooked? I brushed him off, but the pieces weren't adding up. That night, I found a note slipped under my door. "Stop digging, or you're next." No signature, just sharp, black ink. I didn't tell Rose. She was already shaken, but I hid the notebook in a locked drawer, my heart racing. A month passed, and the notebook's shadow lingered, but Rose and I found a rhythm. She visited daily, her laughter brighter, her grief softer. We were careful, keeping the notebook hidden, but the threat felt real. Ryan had gone quiet, avoiding me in the office, his eyes shifty. I'd caught glimpses of a man lingering near the complex, a tall figure in a dark jacket, watching from a distance. JP, maybe. I didn't know, but I wasn't taking chances. One Saturday, Rose invited me to her apartment for dinner. It was a big step, her place, where Mark's absence still echoed. I brought a bottle of Texas red wine, and she made pasta, simple but warm. We ate on her patio, the Austin skyline twinkling under a clear sky. "I'm ready," she said, breaking the quiet. "Ready to move forward. Not just because of you, Jack, but because you've shown me it's okay to let go." I took her hand, her fingers steady in mine. "I want to be there with you," I said. "We'll take it slow. But we deserve this." The threat still loomed, but we faced it together. I hired a private investigator to trace JP, who turned out to be a low-level enforcer tied to a money laundering scheme Mark had been part of. Ryan, it seemed, had been a reluctant middleman, too scared to talk. The police got involved, and JP was arrested, the notebook key evidence. Rose and I kept moving forward, our mornings filled with coffee, our evenings with quiet talks. Months later, we were waking up together, our love steady, not loud but true. It wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about second chances, and we'd found ours.